And here we go. We are live. So today on Lifestyle Medicine, we've got Chad Herendeen. So Chad, thank you for doing this interview, first of all, man.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, you bet. So Chad how long have you been doing the endurance training stuff? You've been doing it for how many years now?
I was trying to think of that. It's probably 9.
Yeah, so it's a bit.
Yeah, good. But there were some years in there with where I was broken, and I had to become unbroken.
You mean in terms of physical injury?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And how old are you now?
I'm 50.
50, yeah. Look damn good for 50. So it must be doing something right for you.
Yeah, good lighting.
Yeah. Well, so originally, Chad, when I wanted to talk to you, I had a few things that were running through my mind, and it was just in the past when we've talked about the endurance training scene. I think what struck me was the mindset, first of all, that you have to get into to do these kinds of things, and then the physicality of the training and, what happens to your body and the diet. I think with any kind of endurance performance activity, at least for me, my mind goes to a bunch of different places of what has to happen in the psyche and the body of a person to do this kind of thing, to get them primed and ready for it, I guess. And then just the driving force of like what has kind of made you get to this point. So we had talked a little bit about that, the origin story essentially of how you got into this stuff. I think that's worth hearing.
Yeah, well, I don't know, it's almost a cliche. I was running through an airport. I was probably about 225, 227.
How tall are you? Just so we have a
5'8".
Okay. Oh, that's pretty sizable for your frame. Yeah.
And I was, trying to connect to a flight, and my heart's pumping out of my chest, and I'm dragging my bags behind me. I'm like, how did I get here? Like, who is this guy? And my flight was delayed 6 hours, so I had 6 hours to think about how I got there and what it meant. And I didn't know what to do. My mom, in her sweet, kind way, had been concerned about me, but I don't think she knew how to voice it. So she knew my dad had a triple bypass. In her family, there's also some heart disease. Since my dad had his triple bypass, my grandfather had a triple bypass. My uncles had stents. It's my dad's uncle died at 52 from a heart attack. His other uncle died at, I think, 52 from a stroke or heart attack.
Oh, I see.
So all this stuff's like rushing to your brain. And at that time I had 3 kids, and I was feeling like maybe I'm not going to, what if I only have till I'm 52?
Right. And
there's a little bit of fear involved, but I didn't know quite what to do. And I was back to my mom had given me this book by Dean Ornish, right, Reversing Heart Disease, that he'd started back in the 80s. And really, I didn't dive into it. I kind of fingered through it, and I saw one thing that stood out to me, because I'd had my cholesterol done not too long before that, and it was in the mid 230s. And he said, if you don't eat any animal products, you won't consume any additional cholesterol. Your body will make cholesterol, but you're not going to add any to it. I'm like,
Yeah.
So of course as I do all things, I go all in with everything I have.
Yeah.
And I don't do half measures very well. I don't do moderation well at all. So all in or all out. And I decided to try being vegan for 30 days. And I did, and I was a junk food vegan. It was potato chips and pasta and all the fake meat products and everything I could. But after 30 days, I lost 12 pounds.
Yeah.
And I felt a lot better, and I had a higher energy. And I'm like, wow. And I celebrated with steak and eggs. And then I'm like, well, I could just be vegetarian. But you know what you can have a lot of when you're a vegetarian is cheese pizza.
Yeah.
And I just would, and it was like that. It just didn't matter if I didn't kind of have those rules for myself. So I made a decision a few months later to be vegan, and it worked for me. My cholesterol numbers dropped, and my doctor was looking at him saying, "What are you doing? This is crazy." And I told him, and he was vegetarian, so he kind of got it, but it was a little extreme to go vegan. And this was actually probably 12 years ago, because I did a good 2.5 years of being vegan before I even started running.
So you were late 30s at this point?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I guess I'd only had 2 kids when I became vegan, 3 when I started running.
Okay.
And then, I always got shin splints when I tried to run. I'd never run more than 6 miles. I'd only done that twice in my life. And I was a pole vaulter in high school. I mean, I was an athletic kid. I was always doing something. And here I am, I guess I was 41. Mm-hmm. And I went out for a 1 mile run, and it felt good. And the rest was just like as longer, farther, harder. And, and I read this thing probably a month into my running endeavor about these ultra marathons. And I hadn't done a marathon yet. I hadn't done a half marathon yet. I had done 1 5K, and I was already like, I could run 100 miles. Why couldn't I run 100 miles?
I can do this.
I can do this.
I've had a morsel. I can do something massively huge.
Of course, I made the mistake. Well, mistake and not mistake. I read Born to Run, which so many people have.
Yeah.
And of course, you think, when you read that book, you think, I need minimal shoes.
Right.
I need to run like I'm barefoot.
Right. That's the barefoot book, right? They're talking about the people that run like many, many miles, but with very little on their feet, correct?
It's really how you interpret it. I think that wasn't what the story was about. That's what a lot of people gleaned from it. And people that, especially people that are ultra runners, typically have a bit of an obsessive personality, right? To be able to do that, commit to that.
Sure. And
so I jacked myself really good with just doing too much too soon. Mm-hmm. But I guess a year later, I did my first marathon, and then a year after that, I started preparing for my first ultra. I signed up for a 50 miler, and I'd moved back to California at that point, and it's over in San Martin, and it's just this little 2-mile loop course, and I'm like, it's perfect. Every 2 miles, I'll have an aid station. Right. I don't have to get freaked out. It's going to be good. And it was great. And the community was amazing. The people are great. It's very different. There's not a real competitive edge to it. It's everybody supporting each other.
Right.
A loving community of athletes.
That's cool.
And ultra runners are all shapes and sizes and backgrounds, and they all come together for this passion that they have. Obsession.
I got to ask one question. When you say all shapes and sizes, are you saying there are like larger framed runners, like big guys?
There are.
And how do they, just logistically, like at least in my mind, I always think of runners sort of like you that are like lean and tight and super fit. How do they fit? I just like in terms of just the logistical physicality of that, how do bigger people run that long without their bodies just taking, excessive stress?
I feel like when you run farther, you run with less intensity. Mm-hmm. No one runs 100 miles without walking some of it. Uh-huh. The elites are going to stop and walk the hill that they can't charge up at mile 89, right? It's like no matter who you are, you're going to engage in some walking.
Right.
And sometimes these folks just go out at a really easy jog. Mm-hmm. Eventually, though, they either trim down or change their diet and end up trimming down, because that's what I think we mostly can agree where diet's concerned, or about where our body composition is concerned, that it's 80% diet. Mm-hmm. What we put in or how we put it in.
Right. Agreed.
And then when we figure that out, the magic bullet is the training, whatever that training, whether it's a HIIT class or it's ultra running or 5Ks, whatever you're doing, that's the magic sauce at the end.
Right.
And that's what it was for me.
Wow. So at this stage right now, just to give, the listeners kind of context, is it, the endurance stuff that you do, it's just endurance marathons, right? It's running is like your primary endurance focus, or are you doing other things also?
Oh, that's right now I'm just running. I mean, I did a triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not great on the bike. I hate to swim, so but I kicked ass at the running. That was great.
Fair enough.
But it was fun. And then I do Spartans and the obstacle races. I really enjoy those.
What's the Spartans? Because I've heard that, but I'm not completely.
There's a whole series of races that are obstacle course races, and they're huge. They're great. They get everybody involved. From, again, doesn't matter your age, your size, your weight. Anybody can do them. If you fail on an obstacle, you have a consequence, like you're doing burpees or push-ups or whatever it may be.
Okay.
Sometimes you're just running through the mud, crawling under barbed wire, and carrying a big bucket full of stones. But it's all good and it's fun. I always try to challenge myself, so I'll sign up and go out with the big boys and girls and see how I do. And I do okay. I mean, I'm no elite. I used to joke that I'm a bit of a duffer as far as running's concerned. I just go out and I do, but I do better than average, and I actually get a little bit better as I get older. Maybe because I started later. I can be a little more competitive than my age group. But,
that makes sense.
So, and I hope to actually be able to put more time and energy to my running and be a little bit more competitive. But I look at this as this long-term goal. I'm not stuck in today or tomorrow or next week.
Right.
Like, what about when I'm 60? I'm going to be placing first in my age group. That's where my head's at.
Right.
Maybe not at 51 or 52, or maybe I will.
Yeah. That's a good place to be. I mean, it's a good attitude to have. It's pretty present in terms of just you're keeping your eye on the ball here and now. What's on your plate, which is pretty cool. With the training, I've got questions. So going from someone who was at the time very out of shape, and you were confronted with more or less a health crisis of sorts, where you knew the kind of genetic lineage and the imprint that you could be going down if you didn't change some things. So once you made the decision to shift gears and actually start doing this and going down this road and really actively pursuing it, what were the biggest hurdles in the beginning? You had mentioned that you were broken for a number of years and you had some sounds like very real injuries. So if those were the hurdles, I would love to hear about them. But if there were more outside of that too, what were the things that what came up first? Because it's a sizable stress to put the body, to do this kind of thing. So what came up in the beginning stages of this process?
Well, there's people that are probably outliers that can go out and they can just go out and they can do a 100-mile race and they can kick ass at it and do really well. And usually those people are in their 20s. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll find them a little later. They still have that kind of lifelong fitness if they've been active that long.
Right.
What I found is for most people, we do too much too fast. Like I was training for a marathon before I'd done a half marathon. It was that type of thing.
Oh, I see.
And as you know, I know in your training, in your studies, in your life, that tendons and ligaments and connective tissues take years to actually thicken and become strong enough to really support the activities as we apply more, whether it be endurance or strength or focus. So I think that's where my failing is. I wasn't patient. I was looking at, well, this is what I need right now. Though that's what I needed at that time. Mm-hmm. Because it's funny, I lived in upstate New York at the time, and though it's beautiful and my family's there and it's wonderful, there is you get some of that seasonal effect. Is that what it's called? Seasonal affect disorder or something?
Seasonal affective disorder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was in the midst of that hardcore in the winter times.
Because you're indoors, right?
You're indoors
all the time. Just
all the time.
No sun. Yeah.
And when I started running, I wasn't indoors. I didn't care if it was 20 degrees out. I was running.
Right. You're just like, I'm fucking outside. Finally.
That's right.
Yeah.
Snowshoeing, whatever.
Right.
And I remember that day because I was feeling very depressed in my life in general, regardless of the season, even with my beautiful kids that, enchant my life, I still had that underlying depression. And I remember the moment that changed is I always did a 2-mile walk at lunch every day for years, as a ritual, as a meditation. And I looked up and it was snow-covered trees and a red cardinal. And I felt that smile just come across my face, like that acknowledgement of the beauty and the connection.
Yeah.
And it's like right then I just knew that things had changed for me.
Yeah.
And it was all because of how I had changed inside and outside and what I was doing. So I knew I was on the right path.
Cardinal medicine, man. Yeah.
Cardinal medicine.
Yeah, that's great. Those moments are nice when they happen, when the kind of the internal terrain aligns with an external moment like that. Like there's a click there where the inside and outside link up. It's wonderful when it happens. It's really amazing. Well, that's very cool. So, okay, so you have this turning point in terms of, you said the depression was real, and that was like a piece of kind of what you were going through. So then, with those hurdles, was it were there more than that? Was that kind of was that turning point kind of like things started to get smoother sailing from that point, or was it?
They did. I mean, I had other life problems, relationship problems. My previous marriage had fallen apart, or was in the process of falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
And within all that, me being able to run saved my sanity.
Yeah.
That physical, that mind-body connection.
It's amazing how many people are able to do something when life, shit hits the fan and there's just problems across the board, right? Whether it's depression or relationships, it's amazing what vigorous exercise will do for the spirit. You move it, you circulate it, you get your blood moving, the endorphins kick up, and then you're a leg up, or at least you're better off. You're not as depleted or as tired as you once were. So let's talk about that a little bit, because this is always kind of the thing I'm always inquiring about people that are, I would say, athletic, or that are using their body physically and challenging it physically. So the depression shifted. What else changed? Like in terms of you doing this very challenging physical activity, what also was starting to shift? Was it mindset? Was it, was it just the physicality of getting in shape? Like what else was kind of shifting that was improving and making things better?
A series of things. One is you look in the mirror and you start to like who you see, and you like that person physically, but you also like that person mentally. Mm-hmm. You like the person that you see who actually committed to something and followed through with it.
Right.
You like the person that gets up at 5 every morning, or stays up after the kids go to bed and goes on a 7-mile run in the snow. You appreciate yourself. So maybe there's some ego involved. I think it's less ego though than a satisfaction of self that was missing,
and a confidence of self too, right? Like in the self, right.
In the self, you feel like you look better. You get to buy some new clothes.
Sure.
There's definitely a broken spirit when you have a broken body. When it's broken, not necessarily when you're recovering because you ran too hard, but
sure.
When I was overweight and I was out of shape and I was out of breath, trying to play with my kids in the backyard, you have a broken spirit. Mm-hmm. And to heal the body and heal the mind, you heal the spirit. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see when you look in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I think that's the crux for a lot of the physical implementation when there's, like you said, I mean, that link is pretty much there. And it's nice because it's it's a Dutch door, it's a two-way
Right.
kind of street, which is wonderful and amazing. Thank God it's not just one way, like you can only get out this way. It's like you can really pull the body and do some things across the board. The question I'm always kind of wondering about with these endurance things is that, people that I know who run, they talk about the runner's high, and they talk about, the endorphins kick up and, your body's going through this process. But at least for me, conceptually, like I'm not a long distance runner. It's not the physical activity that I've done in the past. So the way I've at least conceptually thought about it is that okay, 26-mile run, right? Like you're going to get a runner's high at some point, but then it ends, right? Like it's 26 miles
Right.
and it ends. But what does that look like in, say, a 50-mile run or 75 or 100 when people are doing this? What does the runner high come and go, or does it stay? What does that look like? And does you kind of I guess, talk a little bit about that, and then what your body goes through, the ups and downs during the duration of a long run or race. What happens? What happens to your body?
Yeah. So there is, I think, a misconception about the runner's high. It took years for my best friend. He's a meditation teacher.
Mm-hmm.
He's been meditating for all of the 30 years I've known him. And I tell him that running's my meditation. He said, "Oh, you just like the runner's high." I'm like, "No, dude, it's, and he would just give me crap all the time."
Yeah.
And it's, at first you get runner's high 2 miles and you're good. You're like, "Oh, that's great." Oh, you get a little endorphins and you're buzzing afterwards. But, it takes longer and longer to get it. And then when you get it, it does not last as long as an endurance event.
Yeah.
And you're right. You have your ups and downs, and occasionally it comes back. And sometimes that's just delirium, that you've been up for 20 hours and
right.
I see bunnies. That's always my hallucination on the other side of the trail.
Time out real quick. Whoa. So you've actually genuinely hallucinated?
Oh yeah.
Oh, no shit. So you actually, that's amazing.
Oh yeah. There's some great, I know people that tell these great stories about their hallucinations. Mine, though, are always bunnies, and they almost always have been, and I don't know why. And I totally believe it in the moment. And I just see these little tiny bunnies by the side of the trail. I'm like, "Oh, baby bunnies, what are they doing?"
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And then I realize I'm hallucinating. Like,
that's hilarious. Oh my God. Okay, so full blown. So that's interesting, right? Hallucinations can kick up during these long.
Yeah, you're overly tired. I mean, I'm the guy out there for 24 to 30 hours on a 100-mile run. I'm not the guy out there for 16 winning the thing, right? So,
right.
So it's I'm a little more sleep deprived.
Right. Okay. So hallucinations are a part of it, and then what about the pain, the physicality, and the pain of what? Because what I'm most fascinated by this process, and I want to extract from you is, so mind over matter. Yes, we all are familiar with this idea, especially in the terms of athletics and physicality and things. But what kind of pain does your body go through when you're doing a long endurance run like this?
For me, the most painful part is generally my feet. They start to ache, and they ache to where you just want to stop. Like you can't run anymore, and you have to make a deal with yourself. And so you're in a constant negotiation. Because there's never been an endurance event I haven't done a ton. I mean, as far as races, I've done a lot of endurance events, whether it be 50-mile hikes or run hikes type of thing, things like that. But I'm negotiating myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to run 50 steps. I'm going to walk 50 steps. I'm going to run 50 steps. And then suddenly you get that fifth or sixth wind, and suddenly your body, maybe those endorphins are kicking in again. Your body's not feeling it. You're doing a slow jog. You're running.
Yep.
And then it goes back. You're like, oh, you think you're over the hump.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got 18 miles to go, and you're like, it's the fucking hardest 18 miles you've ever run in your life. You feel like crawling. You just want to stop. And you can. You can quit anytime you want. Especially on those loop courses where you're kind of coming, I can go to that aid station, I can just stop.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out how not to. Like why not? Why not stop? You can come back and do it another day.
Right.
So
there's nothing technically stopping you.
It's like, okay, I paid $100 for the race, but it's only $100. It's like some good sleep and
some
an ice bath would be a lot better right now.
Right.
But there's the reward at the end that is so powerful when you finish. Yeah. When you cross that finish line, you know that you've accomplished something that you weren't sure that you were going to be able to do. And maybe it's even more rewarding when you knew how badly you wanted to quit.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's the kicker, right? In the end, it's like, what are we really doing here? It's like, it's not just an endurance activity, because it seems like there's a payoff, right? It's like the spirit payoff. It's like, what are we really doing here? There seems like we're actually, the trade-off is the spirit upliftment. It seems like kind of what you're talking about, right? It's like, yeah, I'm physically in shape, and yes, because in theory, right, you could run, let's say you were doing 50 miles, right, and you ran 30. It's like, you've definitely gotten your workout for the day, right? Like or the day and a half, however long it takes you. So at that point, it's like, what are we really dealing with? And it's like, yeah, we're kind of dealing with spirit tonification, spirit upliftment, spirit building, which is pretty cool. I mean, that seems like a pretty reasonable thing to want to come into contact with. And I'm assuming that's a big driving piece, right? It's not just the like, I'm in shape. It's like,
no, it's hard to describe, but there's something about being in your own body when it feels broken and worn down and worn out, when you feel every twinge of every muscle, and you feel every drop of sweat, you feel your thirst immensely, and to be that connected with self, it's, I don't know, it's a sacrifice, it's a pilgrimage, it's self-exploration, it's all of these things. I never feel more connected to myself than when I'm out on a trail on a very, very long run.
Yeah. You're not the first person to say something to that effect. I've heard very similar things with people that do endurance type training, and then also people that are just deeply physical, with their bodies. If they're doing some kind of training like this, like that's one of the things that people are sort of looking for, and that they're wanting to build and experience more of as they go through. So, okay, so the physical pain, your feet. In terms of running, so if you do this and you go through these events and you've run, 50 miles, what happens after? Like after you've run that long, and when you finally stop, I mean, the spirit euphoria you're talking about is that I've done this. Oh my God, this is amazing. The spirit is uplifted for sure. But then does your body just essentially give you the biggest, like, fuck you? And does everything just start to crumple? Like, what happens after the race?
Well, it depends on the distance. I mean, I can do a 50K and it's not a big deal. And I can go for a run the next day if I want. I usually give myself a little time. 50 miles, a little more intense. 100 milers, I've only done a couple, and I wasn't even fully prepared for them. But I went and I did them, and I felt pretty broken after my first one, because I said, I'm going to kick it in this last 100 yards. I'm just going to
go balls out.
Because I'm walking the last 12 miles mostly, walk, jog.
Yeah.
And then that last 100 yards, I just felt something tweak, like right behind my knee, and it was probably upper gastroc, and I was limping for weeks. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So that was just because I had all of this, tension and trauma, and probably before I was ready for it. Like, I'd only been running a year and a half probably at that point. I think when I did it. So there I was broken for a while. I think I could go out there now pretty confidently and just push through. And a couple days rest, and I'd be able to go out and do a jog. Your body, adapts.
That's the interesting part to me. And then it sounds like even as you've done this, right, your body has become more resilient, not less, through this process, right? I mean, even as you've gotten older, I mean, that's kind of remarkable when you think about it. That sort of defies the trend in a sense, like we get weaker as we get older. And it's like, well, actually your body's become more resilient because you put it under a certain amount of stress for a number of years,
Right.
Which is pretty cool.
What was interesting about that one, so I did that race, and I had that lingering injury. Mm-hmm. And then on New Year's, I wanted to go out and do a New Year's Day run, and I got about 5 miles in, and I tweaked that same point in my leg.
Uh-huh.
And it lasted months. So I was on and off running, and I didn't know how to heal it. And then I went and I did, excuse me for a sec.
Yeah, no worries.
I went and I did Mount Whitney with a group of people. And we did kind of run, hike it. And I thought, wow, it actually feels better. And so I started doing a lot more hiking. And I started meeting up with people, and I'd go and I'd do some peak bagging. So you just go find a high peak and you just charge up it that day, do a little loop. And the more I did that, the more I healed. So what it did was it gave me that intensity and of effort and that challenge, but it slowed me down. So right. I wasn't putting the same impact into it.
Right. So it's like cross training, more or less, right? I mean, you're still doing a difficult activity that's still kind of in the same spectrum, but you're doing it in a more moderate way. And it seems like that was actually therapeutic for the body.
Exactly.
Do you still, so given that, right? Like the way I always see it is like, it's all a learning curve, right? With this kind of stuff, especially you're learning your body, you're learning your limits. Would you say that that's still a rhythm that you sort of implement now? Is that one of your healing tools? That if you're feeling stressed from running, do you hike instead? Do you kind of interplay between those two, or does it? How do you use it?
I don't know if I hike so much as I just find something else to do, or I do less. But I haven't been in that situation again.
Right.
So, why I took a number of years off, not completely 100%, but there were months I didn't run at all. And I changed a lot. I changed a lot of what I was eating. Because I went back to being an omnivore, and I went back to being vegan. I went back to being an omnivore, and I went back to being a vegan. And some of that has to do with the blood work that my numbers, and some of it just how I feel best. But I know how my body responds to certain foods. I know everybody's different.
Yep.
And for me, if I don't do any dairy, I don't do any sugar, I don't do any animal products, I feel unbreakable. I'm not, but I feel unbreakable, right? I mean, I know I am breakable, but
sure,
I recover so much more quickly. And sugar was the key this last time. They've been going bursts of a few weeks without sugar at a time in any form whatsoever.
Yeah.
And
when you say no sugar, are you saying, so does that mean no fruit of any kind, or just no processed sugar?
Fruit.
Just no processed sugar.
I won't juice it. No, I won't have juice. I won't have honey. I won't have anything that's a simple, injection of sugar into my system.
So you always have fiber with it, essentially. You eat the whole food.
Exactly. Whole food.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I would love to pick your brain a little bit about that in terms of the veganism piece, right, and the vegetarianism. And you've done endurance training under an omnivore diet, and you've done it under a vegan diet.
Oh hell, I've done it under a paleo diet. I've done it.
All of it. Okay, so
I've tried keto.
Right.
I love to play. Right. It's exploration.
Very cool. Well, that's great, because I think personally, when I'm working with people, regardless, like the areas that I'm working with people in, whether it's, lifestyle, stress reduction, blah, 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 like all the things that I'm walking them through, one of the things that I'm always kind of bringing back to is that people are like, well, what should I do? And a lot of it, the guidance is like, you have to really try some things and just see what resonates for your body. And I think that's experience is one of the best, teachers in the larger context, is just that you've got to try these things to actually know, because it's all theory otherwise, right? Theory sounds great. The keto totally works, right? It sounds amazing. And it's like, doesn't work for some people. It totally works for others, like you said before. So I've always been curious about this, because I appreciate that you say every body is different. I agree completely, fully on that statement. And if you wouldn't mind describing it, like what your body feels like, when you are eating meat and doing an event and you're doing, the vegan, because I have a framework, the way it's kind of like I guess I'm just like speculating, but it seems like vegan would make sense in a way that if you're doing something that long and you're pushing your body that long, and it seems like the lighter, more energetic foods, things that are not as heavy, would actually kind of be the move, or at least part of the time. Like that's the way I've thought about it. But then I've heard other people saying it's like, no, I need long standing, people are nibbling on bacon when they run sometimes, like I've heard. So yeah, can you just kind of describe it, at least like what it felt like inside your body to do, vegan, and then to do like meat eating within those races, I guess.
So, yeah, I feel lighter, and I don't know that my body weight changes that much, but I feel lighter inside. Like I feel, right. I know my joints change. I know that I have more mobility when I'm vegan, and I don't know if that's the cheese. I don't know if it's, right. Whatever it may be. I feel more energized. There's something that slows me down when I eat an omnivore diet, whether it be the meat or I'm not sure. I'm trying to think, because as you know, my wife is a doctor of Chinese medicine, and so she was, when we started dating, I was kind of back to being an omnivore, and she was like, yeah, I don't know how you would do that as a vegan, because Chinese medicine, you animal.
Yeah, they keep it in the mix for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And she too has learned that, I just respond differently than maybe most of her patients would respond.
For sure.
But I was trying to think within this question that I did feel better when I started eating an omnivore diet as we were starting to date. But when I was vegan before that, I was a bachelor vegan who was having a lot of potato chips and
right.
vegan junk food. And then I went to this, this kind of like whole food omnivore. Of course that's going to be better.
Right.
But now, even though I have my share of vegan junk food, but now I can compare that to, if I have a whole food omnivore diet with a whole food vegan diet, any day of the week I feel better on the vegan diet. And that's me. Right. And I don't push this on anybody. My children are omnivores. That I'll talk to people about it. I don't even think this is the right choice for everybody. I think it's the right choice for me.
Yeah. Man, there's a ton of wisdom in that, because, that carries a lot of truth. You speaking about your body and your chemistry and how like you can just, especially putting your body under that kind of stress and having like that as your litmus test, like where you can actually say like, yeah, I've done it, I've actually done it, and can say this route actually considerably works better for my body than this other way. That's huge. That's very interesting. And I've wondered about that. And there are, that's pretty, at least from the endurance people that I've talked to that are doing similar type things, there's quite a few people that are kind of like the vegetarian vegan types who feel way better. And then I've also met the ones who are like, nope, gotta have, I have to have some kind of, animal product. And it's really interesting to see. It's just in the end, it's like people just listening to what their frame and their physical body needs to go through. It's interesting. It's very interesting.
And I listen to a lot of ultra running podcasts. I follow quite a few ultra runners, and there are elite vegans and elite meat eaters, right?
Right.
And there are people that are just like, I don't care. I have potato chips and jelly beans, and I win every time.
You're like, oh, wonderful, right? Oh man, that's funny. What do you think? Or not? What do you think? What do you eat? I'm assuming you have to eat, right, when you're doing these races, right? You have to eat along. Right. You have to eat along the way. So do you eat and walk, or do you stop? What do you do? Like how does
whatever? It depends on the race. I mean, if it was a race that I really wanted to do a good time, I'd grab something and keep going. But if it's a social event that you're just out there doing 50 miles with people, sometimes I stopped. And when I done the 100-milers, I actually would bring. There were a couple of courses that we did. One was like a 4-mile loop with these hills, but they had like the aid station had a kitchen, so they had outdoor kitchens. So I brought this vegan coconut curry, and that was just so sustaining. And it was amazing. It was cold. It was November. There's frost on the ground. I'm like, yeah, give me that soup. Thanks for heating it up.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. What are there any staples in terms of dietary stuff that you take with you or that you eat consistently on these runs or these long endurance events?
Well, the endurance events, I kind of give myself a pass. If it's like a 50K, 50-miler, because you really just need food.
Yes,
right?
Calories.
So whatever. You're not going to know. Sometimes they'll have potato chips. You want that salt. Sometimes they'll have Coke, and you're just like, give me a Coke. I'm down this sucker.
Right.
And I'll have peanut butter and jelly. With the stuff I bring for myself, I used to take like bean burritos, just beans and corn tortillas, and just let them sit out in the warm sun, and they'd like kind of just be warm when I grabbed them. Yeah. So it depends. I'm not a big like gel guy or somebody. I don't like to eat a lot of bars. I like
the goo, right? Foods. Like that like liquidy, sugary. Yeah.
What I've found, and I don't know if it's because I've become more fat adapted as I've been running more, but I don't feel like I need as much fuel for events that are a marathon or less. So I just did a half marathon. Well, I guess 2.5 weeks ago when I was back visiting family in New York, and I had one bottle of water and no food. I just like kind of.
Oh shit! Wow.
And I felt amazing. It was this nice, long, hilly half marathon.
Wow.
And I just like I felt great afterwards. I was like, hey, this is great. That was I don't want to say easy because it wasn't easy, but it felt much less effort than it has felt in the past.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's interesting you say that because when I was 18, my dad, when he was still alive, he took me to Ireland, and it was a biking trip for 2 weeks through Ireland, and you bike anywhere from 35 to 80 miles a day. Like it's just depending on the day and the terrain, and it's very beautiful though, right? And you can get in a van at any time if you're tired. They'll pick up the bike for you, and it's very cool. But I remember one of the guys, this guy named Kieran, who was probably mid-50s at the time. He was this skinny little wiry guy, and he had been riding. He just rode every day like this for throughout an entire season. All summer, most of the fall. And he was always doing this, and it was amazing how everyone on the trip, when they would get up in the mornings, they would have all the Americans, right? We'd have these big breakfasts because everyone's like, I got to gear up for, this like 35 to 80 miles of riding. And people are getting bacon and eggs, potatoes, orange juice. They're just, croissants. They're just stuffing themselves basically just to have fuel for the day. And this guy every day, the guy would get up and he would just have, a slice of whole grain toast that was thick and like homemade with like a fat piece of butter and a cup of tea, and maybe a few nuts. And he was, I mean, without question, I was always like, how do you do that? Like, how do you not eat food? And he's like, yeah, my body has just adapted. I really don't need much, like it's just kind of, which I always found kind of remarkable. I mean, that floored me the entire trip for the 2 weeks. And it sounds like you're kind of saying the same thing, maybe, that like you don't need as much food. Is that accurate as you're going through these?
As your body becomes more aerobically fit,
Mm-hmm.
it taps into your body fat rather than your glycogen stores. But you have enough fat. Anybody has enough fat on their body to fuel them for many, many miles.
Right.
And so obviously there's a mix going on, but more and more, especially the last year, I've seen that I go out on my long runs on Sundays and I don't take anything to eat.
Wow.
And I'll go anywhere from, 13 to 22 miles, and I don't need any fuel. I've done it fasted, where I've gone out and done those, but I like, my old standby is always a bagel and a banana. And that would be what I'd like just have. And that's a race morning breakfast.
Right.
Just simple, some carbs, some fruit, go to the bathroom, get all that taken care of, and then go to the starting line. And
you said, just to be clear, you said you've done keto, correct?
I tried keto, yeah.
So was that vegan keto or omnivore keto?
No, by that vegan keto would be badass if you could really pull it off.
Yeah, and people do it. Like there are vegan keto people who are like, they swear by it. But when you did the race, you were doing meat eating keto? Or you were doing? I've done races where I think the last 50 miler, I think I was doing keto at the time. And it was fine. I mean, but see, I can only eat so much bacon. I can only I've done this a few times before, right? Like just playing around. And so this last time that I was doing keto, I had a little bacon here and there. Mm-hmm. I'd have a lean piece of meat, but I really went for the kind of the avo and the nuts and that was where my primary fats were coming from. Uh-huh.
Not so much the animal fats.
Yeah. And your energy still stayed up during the race, like the event?
It was pretty good. I think keto really lends itself well to being fat adapted. That's what keto is all about, right?
Right.
You're burning ketones and you're burning your body's natural fuel.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I was, what was it? 3 or 4 months ago, I was looking through my email, and I think it was the keto thing that like threw me, because it was like, you couldn't look up keto without lose weight fast.
Right.
It's a marketing gimmick. It's not even about health. And for so many people, so many, to get real information. Well, to get real information, you have to talk to somebody that's really doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to talk to somebody what is your health like? And what are the long-term effects of keto? Mm-hmm. Can keto cure cancer? I don't know. If I had cancer, I'd probably try keto if I had a shot, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know that it can. There's many facets to it. There's many logics to it. And then there's counterpoints to all of it.
Sure.
And so it's an exploration. Where I have felt the worst in races is where I didn't limit my sugar.
Uh-huh. So were you eating lots of what? Or were you just like drinking?
Oh, I love sugar, man. I just like, I just, love it. I love chocolate. I love, I love a cream soda. It's like one of my favorite drinks.
Yeah.
I love sugar, juice,
mm-hmm.
and sugar in my coffee, whatever. But
you'll take it, right?
Right. But so those are the correlations I see. That's the one thing I know, that if I take sugar out of my diet, I'm better.
Yeah.
Like it's night and day.
Most people are. Like, I mean, I think that's pretty across the board. If processed sugar is definitely not your friend.
And I'm not lactose intolerant by any means, mm-hmm. but if I take dairy out, I'm better.
Yeah.
And if I haven't been limiting wheat lately, because a vegan, I'm like, okay, I'm already giving up these other things that I really like. So I'm having some Ezekiel bread, man.
Right. I'm going to enjoy the shit out of this. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, you can't throw in the towel on everything.
So,
wow. Well, oh, man. So, Chad, if there were, we've touched on kind of like diet, the stress the body goes through, the mindset and the upliftment that comes from, I guess, just the endurance scene, right? And being physical with your body. But, if there were like kind of like parting words to the audience or like a roundabout, I don't know, like idea, theme, or message that if you were to like give to people, maybe people aren't going to become endurance, runners, but if you were to just kind of like summarize everything that you've experienced, like what's been the biggest takeaway from this process for you?
Well, I've gotten to do things I never thought I'd do in my life, right? That I didn't even imagine doing, whether it be hiking Mount Whitney, and just, now I know I've done that a couple times. To going to some of to Humphreys in Arizona, or I did rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, which is, I don't know if that's become kind of a cool thing to go do now.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, those are the things that, so you don't have to be an endurance athlete, but find something that maybe you never thought you'd do, and try it, and make it small, and then make it bigger. And it can be anything. It could be, walking to the top of your local mountain with your family.
Right.
But it's whatever that reward is, because we're built on reward, right? Yeah. We're humans, whether it be what we eat. It's all about eat, play, sex, right? It's like those are our rewards. So this is my play. And I guess that would be my recommendation to anybody, is find something to find passion in. That's outside of the walls.
I like that, man. And I think it's a good message, because I think, people find it in so many different ways, but I think, whether it's, I think the physicality and pushing our bodies are great. Some people, it's not their thing to do it that way, but if you can find it, right, it's a beautiful thing to incorporate. So I appreciate the message, man. And I know that like ultra marathoning, this kind of stuff isn't like your primary like epicenter of your life, but it's a huge piece. But do you have, is there anything, is there anything you want to share with the audience in terms of people that can track your progress? If there's like a, I know you don't have like a website for, Chad Herendeen running, do you, or something like that?
No,
okay.
I don't. I think like there's always Strava. There's Athlinks, which is .com, which is, you can find anybody's race results anywhere. So if you ever did a race, I can find your ass.
That's cool. That's good to know.
And so there's stuff like that. I have a blog that I shared with you today. I don't write in it much, but I kind of had fun writing in it today. So I thought maybe I
got to peruse some of it. It was actually cool. I liked, I read a little bit about sort of your emotional process of, I might butcher this a little bit, but you were talking about how, there's like that fear of, or I think you were talking about training, but not training enough to be like, you kind of kept yourself in a cool place. I liked you saying that. It was very honest. You're like, if I don't train too much, then I can just kind of like sit back and do the race. But if I under train, it kind of keeps me in this place of not having to push as hard as I wanted to. But I thought that was really cool how you were talking about that.
I shared that with Adriana tonight because it was honest.
It's very honest. Yeah.
There's this we all have fears of failure, right?
Of course.
But there's also those fears of success, which I wasn't able to connect to very easily. Like, it just, a fear of success doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh wait, yeah, I kind of do.
Yeah, especially with
success,
context,
there's
right?
expectation, right?
Hell yes, there is. Yeah.
And so I think what I said is I'm an elite half-asser.
Yeah.
And I am really good at half-assing shit. And unfortunately, And fortunately, you know, I know myself. Um, so this is why I can actually step back and say, yeah, I don't have to be this guy today.
Right.
And yeah, I can say I have 4 kids and a wonderful wife and a lot to do. And so maybe I'm not going to go out and run today, but I can't continue to use that as an excuse every day of my life, because what I do is I'm not being my authentic self. I'm not giving self to my passion and my purpose. Because I think this is my purpose in many ways.
Yeah.
Because our passions are our purpose.
Agreed, man. I, couldn't agree more. So, well, Chad, thank you so much, man, for just sharing your insights and the experience, and letting me just pick your brain about this stuff, because I think, for one, it's interesting just hearing about, something that's foreign to me that, like I'm not doing. But then I think the parallels that it has for our life and how we live and how it changes, right, our psyche, our mindset, our spirit, I think is really important. And that was like a big piece of why I wanted to get you on here. So thank you for being willing to dive into it and just talk about it openly. It was helpful, and it was very cool to hear.
Well, thank you. It was fun.
Yeah. Well, Chad, thanks again, man. And I appreciate your time.
All right. Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.